When you're fighting a demigod, what do you say? Written by 1shot_2shot. Dubbed by Melberry Stars. Summary. This is it. The last battle. Class A, the pro heroes, the world all watching on as a green and red lightning snaked across the battlefield in increasing speeds. The whole world watches as a green-haired teen stands against a white-haired demigod. The whole world watches as Deku fucking body slams his opponent while screaming, "Suck my balls!" Or, I had this thought the other day about Deku totally being a Gen Z, and then thought, oh shit, that's hilarious. Here he was, the end of the world. A man standing 300 yards away from Deku, his hair reflecting the sunlight into the teen's eyes. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of news helicopters in the sky, steering clear of the battlefield. Eraserhead stood, his eyes ever staring as the white-haired man laughed and laughed and laughed. It was grating against Midoriya's ears. His classmates stood nearby, injured but not dead. Uraka was missing 3 fingers. Todoroki was cauterizing long, deep gashes that ranged across his body, ever silent. Bakugo was out, his head bleeding. Iga's left leg had been rid of his engines by All for One. Sue was just overall bad, bleeding from hundreds of small scars. The pro heroes stood, sat, laid, bled, useless to the world around. Nezu was dealing with the League of Villains on his own, and Midoriya was the only one standing in unscathed. Blood soaked the battlefield, a ruined city. Midoriya thanked every god in existence that they had cleared it out before All for One made his appearance. Midoriya felt pangs of emotion from his quirk, those lost souls watching with wide eyes as the final battle commenced. Danger sense was ever present, panging with increasing tones as All for One stepped forward again, still laughing. And Midoriya watched, and then grinned as he thought of something. He stepped forward once, twice, and then cleared 250 yards in a few seconds with his quirk, coming up to stop as he waited for the helicopters to arrive. The close-in, the whole world awaited a battle, a bloodshed, an ending. All for One! Midoriya shouted, projecting his voice over the distant sounds of the helicopters. He stood in a fighting stance as he prepared the next words carefully. The past users watched in anticipation, recently joined by Yagi Toshinori, thanks to Shigaraki. 8 glowing figures, eyes wide, watching as the scene through their successor, through their savior. Each sat on a comfortable lawn chair, plush with cushions, except for first and second, who were sitting on a couch leaning against each other. 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th all waited in anticipation. 7th, his mentor stood up suddenly with a grin. Oh shit! First looked up at her with tired eyes. 7, do you have something to share? Just wait, this is gonna be great. All for One laughed, and finally, when his chuckles died, and he stopped gasping for breath, he faced his enemy. Izuku Midoriya, how lovely to see you here. Actually, I have a gift. He reached into his back pocket and took out a wrapped package, tossing it to the teenager's feet. Said teen kicked it lightly before taking it and unwrapping it. What the? Izuku dropped the package, dry heaved into a nearby hole, looking back at the package every few times. Inside sat 6 small objects, 3 fingers and 3 small pieces of metal, Araka's hands and Ida's leg. I hope you like it, because soon there'll be enough to go around. The man snapped his fingers, and the ground shook. Rubble shifted in the far distance as a large figure emerged from the shadows. This one was All for One's favorites. It took years for him to find all the quirks he needed, but once he did, it was perfect. A giant, towering above all others, large, but bat wings stretched from its back, a large tail and neck revealing themselves. Never say All for One didn't like the classics because it was incredibly classic. It was a fucking dragon. Instantly, gunshots and quirks blasted the beast. Eraserhead remained focused, though, eyes on the prize and all that. Such a shame. I was waiting to use him for my victory lap later, but it can't be helped. The end is near after all. Izuku's expression didn't change. All for one, have you heard of D's? All for one was taken aback. No, he had never heard of such thing as D's. Is that some kind of slang? D's what? D's nuts! Instantly, the teenager was at 100% power one for all, his veins crackling with green energy. He closed in less than a second, blasting the white-haired man into the sky with an uppercut that could raise mountains. After a powerful leap, the hero slammed his fist into the villain's stomach, sending him crashing to the ground. The earth shook as All for One felt his ribs crack, his skull fracture. He spat mouthfuls of blood, his nose running with red liquid. However, the distraction had led Eraserhead to lose sight of the man underneath all the earth, so he was quickly healed. What the? Have you ever heard of Imagine Dragons? The teenage shouted as he pulled the villain to his feet, launching him into the air yet again, quickly following. What? Imagine dragging these nuts across your face! Black Whip settled around his waist as the teen pulled him close and then punched him hard enough to rival All Might's United States smash. He didn't let Black Whip go. No, he didn't. He pulled him in again, like some fucked up game of paddleball where the object is to rapture, break, or generally destroy as much as the human body as you possibly could. All for One stretched out his hand, letting a loose torrent of ice, fire, steam, air, earth, lightning, and every other element he had in his quirk roster. But the child simply dodged with no hesitation and then pulled on Black Whip. Suddenly, All for One was pulled hundreds of feet in the air, and he saw one last smile before the child ripped him around like a fucking lasso and tossed him towards the ground at Mach speed. He's sure his heart gave out for a second there, but he didn't have time to think about that before the teenager slammed down into the crater he made beside him, bringing two fists clenched together down on the villain's skull. Izuku was enjoying this a lot, for some strange reason. Maybe it was because he could basically do whatever he wants to this scum and get away with it. Maybe it's because he can hear the voices of 7 somewhat strangers cheering him on. Or maybe it's because he's imagining the face of his runaway father on this villain. Either way, he's cackling. Hey, All for One, have you seen Candace recently? The man groaned in response, and Izuku's grin grew. Candace, dick fit in your mouth! He pummeled the already broken man, each punch sending shockwaves that reached the clouds, each punch directing all of his past anger, hate, annoyance, vengeance, and even love to his compassion, his kindness, his hope to kill all but one person. You see, One for All is a stockpiling quirk, but it is also an exponential growth quirk. The first user couldn't throw a punch, but when that transitioned to the second user, there was a massive boost in strength, and to the third, even more so. The best way to describe it would be that the first user had a power level of none. The second would have one of 5, the third 25, and so on and so forth, which means the numbers and terms that Izuku Midoriya has strength of 5 with the power of 8, which is approximately 309,625. So it's no wonder that All for One died in less than a minute. Izuku didn't realize he was pummeling a dead body until 30 seconds after the villain died, when the blood stopped pumping and his danger sense stopped pinging. His adrenaline was basically fueling him on his own now, and he quickly stood up, tossed the dead body over his shoulder, and jumped out of the crater he made. The dragon was still wreaking havoc, but Izuku simply ran over and punched it in the head, which knocked it out. He ran back to the forgotten package that tossed away, picked it up, eyeing it for a moment with distaste. All for One kept bleeding for quite a while. His quirks were still fueling him just slightly, but no quirk could bring somebody back to life. Izuku sat on a piece of concrete and passed out, but only after throwing the dead body at a wall a few times to relieve some stress. And he was like, "Can this dick fit in your mouth?" And fucking body slammed him. It was hilarious. He heard a voice ringing out from the dark mist. He looked to find 8 past users of One for All talking and laughing joyously, but each held a certain tension over their shoulders. Hey. Izuku froze up as he heard his voice. Those dreams never let him speak. Midoriya! Ran out as he did. Izuku! And one, my boy! The past users crowded him around, hugging him, congratulating him, high-fiving him, complimenting his technique. laughing at his D's nuts joke. Cheering, Izuku watched as they all laughed at him, joining along, and cheered with them, finally free of the black mist that had separated him from his previous dreams. I did it! It finally sunk into at that point, 9 figures all sitting around on lawn chairs, a table between them. They were playing a game of Uno. Where had they gotten the cards? No one knew. Yep, First Ed, glaring at the +4 that All Might had put down. All Might shrugged apologetically. What does this mean for you? He asked, worried. The figures quieted down for a large moment, and Izuku's worry grew tenfold. Finally, First spoke up. There are 4 Thywongs that could happen. The first outcome is simple. We die with you. This ends the heritage, but it's probably for the best because the next user would have to deal with a quirk that can level mountains. The second outcome is that you guys could give us up in case we'll continue and be passed along, and eventually there will be a person who chooses not to pass it on. Midoriya nodded. That was the problem for future him.